Hey, Joey, I really appreciate you making time to be on the podcast today, man. It means a lot to me.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for having me.
So, you and I get the luxury of being able to go on these long walks around Alta Lake and Nita Lake together and just chatting about leadership, talking about the things you've learned in your lengthy career, building up one of the most impressive businesses in a ski resort in the world in beautiful Whistler, British Columbia. And that's why I wanted you on the podcast is, in our conversations, as I was listening to them, I'm like, man, we should just record these sometimes and put those out into the world. So here we are doing that today. And I think where I want to kind of have a jumping off point with you is, when you started this back in the day to where you are today, your philosophy or your approach to leadership has probably shifted. And I'm curious, when you think about where you are today as an entrepreneur, as a CEO, like what's changed the most? What's the most pivotal thing that has shifted in how you show up as a leader day to day?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. To me, I would say what I didn't recognize then when I was starting out was how important culture is. And as I listened to myself say this, I was listening to the person in my seat today telling me that, but I wasn't, it just kind of went over my head. It's actually what was going on because we were, you know, back then building a team. I mean, it was very small. Whether it was throwing a party or running our first bar, it was really about building a great team of people who were aligned with our, desired outcome. And then we were able to go about, our days and in a way where there was a lot of trust and you get to a point where you could finish each other's sentences and just created an energy and a strategy that was um, that worked, that made people want to show up early and stick around and come back often. So the business worked, even though I didn't even realize we were creating a business when we were throwing parties, right? We were just kids throwing parties, or at the university throwing a party at the university. So what we were doing was creating alignment. We were building a team. There was incredible culture, even though I didn't know what a word vision meant or mission meant and those kind of things. So now that the organization has scaled from having one or two people throwing a party to or 50 people in a bar to 1,000 people, it's like, how do you get that same feeling when you can't see everybody or know everybody's name? So that I actually think's the biggest, uh, what I was being told back then is the reality of where I'm at today. It's just, I don't know if that explains it.
Well, it's interesting too because as you think about how that culture has grown, you went from a few brands now to 19 different brands. Is that number correct as of today?
Yeah, yeah, it's sort of different. We've kind of evolved from throwing parties to, being into, different food and beverage, from just dance bars to some restaurants and pubs and lounges and to hotel rooms and experiences now. So we're kind of in the whole tourism business. Yeah. So just, we're in the whole spectrum.
So you go from F and B when you're starting now, you're into your full blast into the tourism business, and so
Hmm.
now being such a significant employer in Whistler, and
Hmm.
also the fact that anybody who's in Whistler is touching one of your experiences as a tourist. Like it's pretty much impossible now to go to Whistler and not be a customer of Gibbons. And so the influence that your culture has expands well beyond the team members that and your employees. It extends into the community and extends far outside of that to the tourists who are coming from all around the world. And that's bigger stakes when you think
Hmm.
about the cultural impact that Gibbons is actually having in this unique microcosm that is Whistler Blackcomb. So when you think about the culture that is as it is today, how would you describe it? If somebody would say, like, yeah, describe to me this thing, this culture that has made Gibbons so successful, where is it today?
Yeah, it's not a straight line. I'll tell you that. You know, going through, you know, COVID and going through the journey is not a straight line, and it's tough, when you get reviews in today's world. You can, if you don't have a good experience, if wait in line too long to get in, or someone's not having a bad day, you get instant feedback through various reviews. We're constantly asking our team every day, how we can serve them better. We're asking our community every day how we can serve them better. We're asking um, our guests every day how we can serve them better. And we get feedback, and it's doesn't feel good when you're not doing a good job at it, and when you got one business where you're there yourself with a team of people, you can fix it right away. You can get there and you can fix it. When you've got multiple businesses all over the place and you see your guests not having a good experience, or you see a member of your team not having a good experience, and or your community, you've kind of let your community down, it hurts, right? And so
Mhm.
I think it's where we're at today is just trying to get ourselves, I don't feel like we need to grow much more. We're kind of in all of the pieces in Whistler, which was a choice I made kind of a long time ago. We were just in the dance bar businesses. Well, you can't. So we scaled into Vancouver and into Ontario, into a few towns over there. Didn't make me happy. I was starting to have kids, and I was on the road all the time. And I was like, "Oh, this is not what I want to do." And so I just want to be in Whistler. I love waking up here every single day. As you know, I still go hike in the mountains every day, and it's where I want to be. But I also love business, and so I thought to myself, "Well, how can we keep growing in business? Well, I better learn some other areas um, that in business that people want to do." So as we've grown into new sectors, you buy a new company, or you get into a new sector, there's a whole pile of learning that goes on there. There's different cultures that are inside those businesses, and different ways that things have been going for a long time that people really believe in. So you know, we really got to get in there and listen and learn. And, I think that in the growth, like we actually were able to grow quite quickly out of COVID. We were a lucky business going into COVID, in that we were in a pretty good situation going into COVID, and a couple businesses came to us, and we were looking to grow before COVID. And then when COVID happened, a couple businesses came to us that we got into. One is the adventure space out on Cougar Mountain with Tag, and that's a whole new business. There's river rafting, zip lining, ATVing, Lumina, night walk, and there's 14,000 acres of space out there that we're looking to bring people out on. Well, that's a different culture out there. So we got out there and started asking some questions. And it takes, where are we at today? We're there. That's what we're doing. We're asking a lot. We're
Yeah.
continuing to ask a lot of questions, and I just don't think that there's any shortcuts. I think it just
Mhm.
takes rolling up your sleeves, getting in there, and really asking a lot of questions, and listening and learning, and figuring out how you create alignment.
So you bring up feedback across the organization then. So, I think that's one of the things as a leader that is there's this duality, right? Like not only are you receiving feedback from people, whether it's your customers or the people that you work with every day, your peers, even the person you report to, but you're also needing to solicit feedback. Like you got to go out and actually ask people, tell me how I'm doing. What do you want more of? What do you want less of? What's just right for you, right? And in your business, as you say, the systems are set up on social media today that you're getting like instantaneous feedback. The person could still be standing in line and writing a Yelp review about one of your businesses like live, right? They're not even in the door yet, and they're saying it's taken too long, for instance, on a
Yeah,
busy Saturday, and when there's 30 centimeters of fresh snow, and they're wanting to get into the most popular bar, Hillside Longhorn, right? Like it's like, okay, so how do you work with your leaders and your managers and your team to to solicit that feedback so that there's this loop, to learn how to receive that feedback without getting defensive, like just take it in, listen to that, what that team member or that customer is saying, and then how do you teach them that process of not reacting, like getting defensive and reacting, but instead being thoughtful and being responsive? Because I can imagine that, like, if you jumped on every single piece of feedback that came in, it would be overwhelming for people. And at the same time, you want to look for trends. And if you could make a guest happy in the moment and it's easy, you kind of want to do that too. So that's an interesting feedback loop that you're in internally with each other, but also with your customers. So walk us through, like, how do you do that? Like in all those different brands with all these consumers coming in, some might be their only experience they're ever going to have in Whistler. Maybe it's a once in a lifetime bucket list experience for them. So how do you process all of that feedback that comes through your organization right now?
yeah. I mean, listen, that's I think something that we try to chat with our team about all the time is that people save up for years to be able to come to Whistler, and they finally get their hotel room. They come out and they show up at your door, and it's so important that we're able to show up to them in the way that they're in their mind they're looking to be greeted in that space. Well, and when we're, I always like to say that, it's our job to exceed everyone's expectations and to recognize that everyone's got different expectations, right? And I think when you can do that, you can have a lot of success. One of the things that we've been chatting about lately, and really we've learned this through the work with your company with Virtus, is learning how to stay above the line, which is
Mm.
this concept from 15 was it 15 commitments to conscious leadership. And I mean, it's just a funny world in that whole. I mean, we spoke about that with Diane Chapman that seeded our forum in YPO 10 years ago, and then you brought that to us over this last year, and the work that we've been doing. Something I study and my mom sort of raised me on is something called A Course in Miracles, which is really around learning how to live without, in a connected way. And what the conscious leadership, what the book, Diane's book on conscious leadership chats about is staying above the line. And what that means is when we approach anything with openness and curiosity and we're asking questions, that's where all productivity takes place. And if we can just be disciplined enough to do it and park our egos to the side and really stay in that mindset, the power of that it's unbelievable. Whereas if we approach something below the line and we know the answers, we get defensive, we go into it with a closed-mindedness, right? There's zero productivity takes place there. And this is really what we're spending some time working on. And I can tell you, we've gone in, we're going through a major restructuring right now. And it's funny because our dance bars, which is sort of our bread and butter, which I, originally was in, as we, acquired a couple of these new businesses, been spending a lot of time in those new businesses and took my eye off the ball a little bit with the dance bars. And the dance bars all of a sudden weren't successful. And so we kind of dove in and recognized that we needed to make some changes in there. There was, people were doing things they shouldn't have been doing in that business. So we've gone in there, and through this process, I met this young guy and he's in there running our business, and he's 24 years old, and he's kind of reminds me of myself when I was that age. He's now looking over our 4 dance bars, and he's got it's a pretty big job to be able to do that. And we've been speaking a lot about staying above the line as he enters into this new business, and he's being challenged by other team members or guests or whatnot, and he's learning how to really stay above the line. So he's the other day, you know we were we've been doing these monthly all team meetings, and I asked for questions to come through, and people can ask those questions anonymously, and they really will stick it to you sometimes, right, on certain things. And one guy, or one person, I don't know who it was, but someone came and asked a question. It was just kind of like the same person that's been coming at me for the same time, the same type of question all the time. I was telling this young leader in our business, well, I'm not going to answer this question for this guy. I'm going to tell him, like, if that's the way he feels, he should just go somewhere else. And it was someone saying they felt like they were walking on eggshells in their business. And then he came to me, he goes, well, Joey, I think it may be of value to you to approach that question, even if it's the fifth time in a row, in a way that's open and curious. Because I can tell you, as a bartender in your business for a while, I was also walking on eggshells. And not because anything that the company was doing wrong, but because of the way that I was led. And one of my managers were telling me, hey, you better not screw up. There's cameras around here. People are watching you. And so I can tell you, I was doing everything right, but I felt like I was walking on eggshells because of the way that I was being managed.
Ah,
And so I
right.
said to him, I was like, wow, here is this guy who's half my age. And that's my ego, right? I'm like,
Yeah.
he's exactly right. So I got to park my ego and get in there and be open and curious and keep listening. And if someone has to ask me the same thing 15 times, I've got to continue to be open and curious. And to me, I think that's what allows us through and allows for us to get to the next level.
It's I love that he had the courage. to come to you and say, hey, Joey, like, if you were above the line, would you not answer the question? Or would you be open and curious to answering his question? And that we'll drop the video that Joey's referring to, the above the line, below the line conscious leadership concept. We'll drop the it's on YouTube. We'll drop it in the show notes, and it's also highlighted in the book that you mentioned, the 15 commitments to conscious leadership. I love that. That you brought that concept into your organization, and we talked about it in the work we do with you, and then you brought it in to your organization, and that another one of your leaders had the courage and the vulnerability to be able to say, hey, I think you're below the line on this. And that's literally the principle. The principle is that when you bring it into your organization, that you're opening up people to giving you feedback, to saying, I think you're approaching this from below the line. And it's such a simple concept, because it kind of right away as a leader, it says to me, right, okay, I got to 180 my thought process on this thing, because I'm stuck in a place that's not generative, that's not curious, that's not future focused, right? And that's letting go of my ego, all the qualities that's creative, all the qualities that are qualities that are above the line. So you've mentioned that book, and you've mentioned the Course in Miracles. I'm curious, what other books, when you look back, because you're a prolific reader, I don't even know how many books you read a year. I mean, I'm in this business, and I think you read more about leadership and leadership development than I do, and I read a lot. I'm curious, like, through everything you've read, what are the other books that kind of really stand out, that have helped to frame how you show up in the world, both just as a human being, as a dad, as a husband, but also as a leader in your organization?
Yeah, I mean, books for me have been, I've never built a company before, right? So you don't, if you've never done this, you got to learn somewhere, and been lucky enough to be part of Young Presidents organization that you know about for since I was pretty young, and I've also been able to have really great mentors, including a great dad and great mom. And so I'm fortunate in that way, but really it's the books that I think you can, I mean, the answer to anything is out there, right? Online or in a book. And so you just got to like search whatever it is that you're trying to figure out. So I would say along the journey, yeah, I went from books to listening to books, as you know, and I don't love exercising. Some people love exercise. I don't love it, but I love learning. And so I can trick myself into exercising by put a book on my ears and going hiking in the mountains. And I
I
do that
love
every
it.
day. And I find like in the morning, if you wake up and you've got all these different issues, I've got all these different, right? But I know when I go up into the mountains and I'm listening to books that I'll come down and I'll kind of like have an answer to all of the issues. They also may be solved because I'm not grinding throughout the day and the team's already solved them for me. So that's a whole other story, I guess. With the books, one book, that I read, the first book I read every single year, which you might laugh at me a little bit about here, is Think and Grow Rich. I read that.
Napoleon Hill. Yeah.
Yeah, it's my like, I read it every year at the start of the season because it kind of grounds me into his 15 principles that he has, which I find to be really good, sort of grounding principles, and believe in those. A Course in Miracles, like you've mentioned, I read that every day. I mean, there's a lesson. There's 365 lessons, and kind of been
Mm-hmm.
doing that for a few years. Uh, my mom sort of raised me on it in the background, so I believe in the core principle of it. I mean, really, what the Course in Miracles is about staying above the line. It's like
Mm-hmm.
giving you the tools to stay above the line. If we can stay above the line, if I can stay above the line always, and I can build a team that's above the line, I don't think it's beatable. Like, I don't think you can get, I think you can only, I'm pretty sure you only can win forever.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want to win at business, then if you could keep your organization above the line, I don't think you can lose because it's just constant productivity. One of the books lately that's been helpful for me has been The Art of Action by Stephen Bengay. It's, and in it, it talks about high performing organizations. And really that's about creating a high level of alignment with a balanced level of autonomy. And so I know we've spoken about that. That's something I really believe in right now. And the way that you get up into that sort of top right-hand corner is through, building trust within your organization, right? You've got to first get aligned at where you're going. Like, where's that desired outcome? You develop a process to achieve that outcome, and then you kind of roll that into your daily habits. And with trust, you can create more and more autonomy. And, what we've found is real A players, they love to have the autonomy, but they also love accountability. right?
Mm-hmm.
And so Stephen Begay talks about that. He was like a war historian that got into also business, and I believe does a good job explaining that. Gosh, I've read so many good books, Mike, on different things. I don't know. That's maybe right there. I mean, it's just in different areas. There's different great books that have been. There's all the coaching books, right? Like the
Mm-hmm.
Bill Jackson stuff, and just great leaders. We're so lucky that guys like Elon Musk and Steve Jobs and Bill Gates and Warren Buffett and Ray Dalio, and people have different. There's always people have different opinions about every one of these, but you can learn so much. Like Ford, Rockefeller, they are all out there telling their story, and I would say that's the thing that I've appreciated the most is that people who have actually gone out there and spent the time doing it. They love sharing what they've learned because their happiness doesn't seem to come from and maybe this is worth sharing is that I remember a young guy I had a dream of getting to a place where I could have a cabin and I have my house and I've got a company that runs by itself, and I achieved that, at a pretty young age in my early 30s, and I was at my cabin and all of a sudden like the machine was running on its own and I was with my family and I was just like, oh my gosh, this is a dream. But I all of a sudden like fell almost like into a bit of a depression and I was like, what's going on? Why aren't I happy? And I was actually talking to my mom about it and at the same time reading a book called The Courage to Be Disliked.
Oh,
And
yes. It's a great book.
it yeah, and in that book they spoke about happiness and they
Mm-hmm.
connected happiness with one's ability to contribute. And
Mm-hmm.
what I realized is that I was no longer contributing. And what I mean by that is, because my mom was like, "What are you talking about? Your company gives back, you create jobs, you do
Mm-hmm.
all these things. You should be so happy." I go, "Yeah, but I'm not contributing. Like, I'm not
Yeah.
doing anything." And
Your personal contribution is missing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I think at that point I realized, I don't know, like when you kind of run when you running a business and maybe particularly in British Columbia or in a small town, it's like you get beat up a lot, right? People I find like in business, it's like people are really excited to tell you what you're not doing right.
Mm-hmm.
And when you've got, when your business gets bigger, you're constantly trying to do to do a better job. And you know, it's taxing, it's hard, right? Because you really want to do a good job. You don't want to let anyone down. You continue to try to do what you can do, right? But and so it's almost like you're kind of taught that business is bad. Like you're a bad person because you're running a business. And and so what I learned during that period of time is that I needed to figure out how to continue doing it. And people are saying, "Well, Joey, like why are you growing your business? Like what else do you need more?" And I said, "No, I don't need more, but I feel like I've got an ability to help with productivity. And in society, like in our town, in our province, in our country, I mean, that's how it's run is it's our job as leaders to create more productivity. What that means is like we can pay more taxes and we can give back to various organizations and we can pay people more and we can give better guest experiences, these kind of things." So I learned through that period of time that it's my job not to grow a business, but it's to or sorry, what I meant through that is that doing business isn't a bad thing. It's really a good thing. And I wasn't getting my satisfaction from achieving some sort of goal. It was actually through the work that I was doing. It was actually
Mm-hmm.
in the grind. And if you can do that above the line, right? The
Mm-hmm.
Course of Miracles tells you, and you can kind of not grip the wheel so tight and do it with effortless effort. And find that sweet spot. It's it's yeah, it's powerful. It's a nice way to be able to live.
I want to unpack some things from there's some nuggets in there, and I want to kind of unpack those. So,
Mm,
the contribution that comes out of The Power to Be Disliked, which is a great book. Originally, I think it was written in Japanese and then translated into English. The concept of purpose and the concept of fulfillment and the concept of contribution, when those are gone from life, as you say, all of a sudden it's like it's not that I want more, but it's I want to contribute more. And right now I don't feel like I've got the fulfillment or the purpose or the ability to contribute. And the irony in that as well is that you're growing all of these small businesses, and then you've got a big business that owns all these small businesses, but really you have small businesses, and small businesses in Canada employ more people than all the large businesses combined. So the largest employer in Canada is small business. And so, as you say, during COVID, when you managed to have a couple of extra brands come in, the reality was you're now able to employ more Canadians who are paying taxes, who are buying, homes or renting places, right? Like you're helping to spur on the economy in a way that you can see your personal contribution. I want to chat about Napoleon Hill's book, Think and Grow Rich, because the interesting thing about that book is I think it was written in 1939. And so whenever I recommended that book, they're like, "Oh, did it just come out?" I'm like, "Yeah, no, it's been out for a minute, and it's been reprinted every single year." So the fact that it's been reprinted every single year since 1939, I think can tell our listeners how powerful of a book that is. And so many of the successful people I know quote that book and reference that
Hmm.
book as being a go-to guide for them. And then when you talk about reading or listening to biographies, I think some people say, well, Steve Jobs was egotistical, so I don't like him as a leader, and so I'm not going to read the book. I'm like, you know what? You may say that about Bill Gates. You may say that about Ray Dalio too. You also may say that about Elon Musk. And if you read the book, I think what happens is I can read the book and I can think some of the things he did and his approaches to how he thinks about business. I really like those things. I'm gonna bring those into my leadership. I see some things he did and I'm like, yeah, I kind of those don't fit my values. So I wouldn't show up those ways as a leader. So I'm not going to do those things that he did. Well, the alternative was to say, based on Elon Musk's media presence, I think this thing about him, so I'm not even going to read the book. And I'm like, man, it's such a great story, though. I was actually driving back from Whistler last night with my daughter. We skied together and had an amazing day. And we started talking about cars, and we started chatting about, we have a Tesla. So we started talking about the engines in them and the batteries and charging and all this kind of stuff. And that got us into Nikolai Tesla and the whole history of it. And I said, do you know how many businesses Elon Musk has started? And do you know why he started? And she's like, no, I don't. I'm like, well, let me tell you about every single business that he has been involved in and started and how they're all interconnected. And by the time we were done, she was like, that's unbelievable. That's so cool that he's done all these things and thought so broadly about humanity. And I said to her, yeah, and when you read about him in the news, there's also some stuff that you might read about and go, oh, I don't like that he did that. And that's okay, right? That's cool. That's like, nobody's perfect. This is how he's showing up in the world, but he's done some very great things. So I think, whether or not you have an opinion about a leader, take the time to actually read their story, because most of the people that have done incredible things in the world have these unbelievable backstories that we can learn a ton from. And I know that you're a student of a lot of the people that you have referenced. So I appreciate you kind of sharing some of the books that have mattered to you. You mentioned mentors as you went along the way talking about the books. Like, tell me about what you've learned from your mentors. Like, what are the things that you've heard from them that have really stuck with you in how you want to show up as a leader?
Yeah, I've been very fortunate to have, I mean, first of all, I've got a mom that's like spiritual and one of the most connected people on earth. So she's always been my guru, I would say, through life on everything and given me the full permission to um just be, you know what I mean? Like just to be myself and like zero judgment and that. So I don't think that there's anything more powerful than that, right? Like so I've got that. And then I was able to lucky enough to meet my wife was when we were teenagers, and she's like very similar in that way. So she just allows for me to show up and be my very best self. I think like, and then I've had a dad who was this, guy that grew up in the back of a barber shop on the other side of the tracks and had to really like fight for, to sort of, get himself to a position where he could own a home and feed his kids and those kind of things. And so, and he was a lawyer and a star athlete. And so his was all around like working hard, being honest, Joey, like the most important thing the most valuable thing you can get with success is a good sleep at night. So don't screw that up. Meaning like, follow the rules, pay your taxes, right? And that's one thing that we've always done in our company for 30 years is been truthful, paid all our taxes, like just, do a good job, right? So I had this yin and yang growing up from from a dad side of things, and my dad's passed now, but my mom is still around and very much the first phone call I make when I find myself needing to get back above the line. And then I've just been able to, through YPO, I guess would be the main thing. Cause I'm not like, I was never a student council type guy or I was never like trying to be a business person, right? Like I finished ski racing. I grew up ski racing and did a couple years on the national development team in Canada and traveling around the world. And I didn't like that. And I wanted to go live a normal life. I went off to university and then I kind of ran the school bar, but I was just I threw the parties because the other ones sucked. Like I'd go to a party and people would be fighting and stuff would be uncomfortable, right? And I'd be like, oh, why
Yeah.
don't you guys just come over to my house and we could do it. I got a
Right.
garage and we could just do it there, and that would be easier,
Yeah.
right? And then I went to the bar at the school, and everyone was the same stuff was happening. I'm like, maybe if I could take this over, it would probably be just better, right? And so
Hmm.
that's why I did it. And then it was like my dean at the business school that was like, see all these like nerds with briefcases that are going to school trying to be business guys. They're actually trying to go learn what you know how to do naturally.
Right.
Because business it's not that complicated, right? You just have to have more come in than go out and follow the rules and make people happy. That's our core purpose, is making people happy.
Right.
It's like, and people who get that get it. If you don't get it, you don't get it. Like it's like that. Talk about alignment, right? So yeah, and then so as you come across people who get that are maybe 20 years, 30 years older than me, that I've met through YPO, it's just really easy conversations, and they're almost like calling me more than I'm calling them because they want to help. They want to see me succeed and help grow this organization so that we can have a really good, Canadian company, right? We need good Canadian companies. So I'd say that like these mentors almost like see the opportunity in what we're doing, and they're just so helpful. Like and there's never been a person that I've phoned to ask questions about that didn't want to help.
I'm curious if we could go to your 85-year-old self. So
Yeah.
now you're 85 years old, and we can jump in the hot tub time machine and bring you back to bring you back to today. What would
Yeah.
your 85-year-old self come here today to tell you? What mentorship would your 85 years old self come here right now to tell you, hey, Joey, I need you to know this?
I think my 85-year-old self would tell me to keep going, keep doing what I'm doing today, stay healthy, because it's hard. And,
Yeah.
we've always grown our company at sort of, our sort of metric that we grow our company on is 26.5%. We've been able to do that since the start. And, I can see myself doing that until I'm 85 years old. That's sort of the plan. And it's less around the met. That's just kind of a benchmark, and it's just a fun sort of thing to challenge ourselves to get there, which is, gets tougher and tougher the bigger we get. I think my 85-year-old self would just say to, yeah, stay close to, first of all, stay healthy, number one, I would say, and then make sure that stay close to your wife because she's the most important thing you have, and then, do a good job raising your four kids. Continue to do that, keep finding ways to give back to your community locally, and provincially and nationally, and figure out globally how to utilize what you're doing for the better good of that. And then keep trying to, do what you love, which is building a great organization with, solid values that does good work, and shows up and does good work. I think that's what my 85-year-old self would tell me, and to not sweat it so much. I think sometimes still, as much as work as I do on Course in Miracles, I still get up too often at 2 in the morning and beat myself up over not being good enough for my team, or not being good enough for my guests, or not being good enough for my community. And I think I got to learn, if this machine if the world's going to let our machine that we're building continue to grow, that's a piece that I need to do more work on.
It's interesting that, how I phrase that with myself sometimes is, am I being as gracious and as kind as I would be in how I'm speaking to myself as I would to my best friend? And
Totally.
right.
And Mike, that's one thing that you taught me is, I mean, that's, if you share those videos that we're talking about the triangle, one of the things that is really below the line is blaming yourself.
Yeah.
Whether I blame myself or blame someone else, it's both
Hmm.
totally unproductive. So if I'm sitting there blaming myself, even though I'm trying to be a good leader and take responsibility, there's a difference there. So I think it's, if for us to continue to grow an organization or grow as an athlete or grow as a community, whatever it is, or as a family or as a body, right? I think it's about spending productive time doing productive things. And as we said earlier, is that productivity happens above the line. It happens by being open and by being curious and by listening. I mean, I'm like you, when people start talking poorly about these leaders who have been able to achieve success in a certain area. And when I say success, I mean, I'm lucky to be surrounded by some of the best dads in the world, the best husbands,
Hmm.
best wives, it's all of those pieces. And I want
Hmm.
to be good at all of it.
Yeah.
Right. So I want to learn, how I can get to be a better dad, how to be a better husband, how to be a better. But when I'm focused on business, I'm going to look at the best business leaders. And
Hmm.
I'm not looking to Elon Musk or into one of those guys. I mean, maybe he's a good dad. I'm not about judging that, but I know
Hmm.
he's been able to do some pretty impressive things in business.
Yeah.
And when you dive in and read his books and listen to his 5-step algorithm on how to, challenge certain things or first principle thinking and that kind of stuff, it's like, it's obviously genius stuff. I mean,
Hmm.
it's mind blowing, right? So I think about being able to approach all of these mentors and leaders in an above the line, open, curious way, like you're saying.
You brought up the triangle in the midst of that piece, and I want to just double down on that a little bit here. So, the triangle that Joey's referring to is a drama triangle, and the drama triangle is where I believe I'm the victim, that the other person is the villain, and then I go to usually my leader or a third person and say, "You need to be the hero." So, I'm the victim here. You got to fix this for me. And as a leader, if you get trapped in that place of playing the hero,
Mm,
then you're triangulating, right? You're not giving that person the skill set to be able to solve their own challenges, and you're not repairing the relationship because still maybe both people feel like victims and think the other person's a villain. You're not repairing the relationship, and I think when leaders learn to move from a drama triangle into an empowerment triangle, where I realize I'm the creator. I'm the person that created this conflict in my life. And people will say, no, the other person did it. I'm like, yeah, that's the victim mentality. So how did I help create this conflict in my life? Like, what's my part in it? When I ground myself in that place, then I can look at the other person and say, yeah, I'm feeling challenged by that person right now. They're my challenger. And that's a very different, mindset. Now, when I go to my leader or to a third person, now they move from the role of hero into the role of coach. And what I'm looking for is for them to help coach me through how to have the difficult conversation I need to have with the person that I'm feeling challenged by. Or maybe I don't even need to have a conversation because I'm the one who created this in the first place. And so I may, through the conversation with my coach, recognize that there's nothing for me to do. Or if there is something for me to do, to have the courage to be able to go to the person I feel challenged by and to have that difficult conversation, to know that I can work through that conflict. Um, and that's the most powerful move that a leader can make when somebody brings an interpersonal challenge into their room, is to move from that place of being a hero to being a coach.
yeah. I mean, if that, if you have the discipline to do that every day, similar to the discipline to, going to the gym and eating vegetables or, I mean, it's like learning how to live above the line, and I mean, listen, I think like like I said, whether I'm dealing with myself or my family or a community, there's always discussion around politics and everyone's got all these opinions. I don't judge too much. I think like if you're going to get up and lead a town or you're going to lead a province or lead a country, gosh, I lead, 1,000 people and that's challenging. I couldn't imagine leading millions of people.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, what a responsibility. So I have a great deal of respect for anybody who's brave enough to get into that role, and anyone who speaks poorly about someone brave enough to get into that role. I'm always like, I just don't know if they've ever been a lead, got put themselves in that situation, right? Because it's so hard, as you know. So, two things I think are so important to measure, and this is what we measure inside our group, is we break our company down into two pieces. We've got our core purpose is making people happy. But I think it's the same thing in a community. It's so we measure every day in real time, we measure productivity and happiness.
Mm.
So our senior leadership team has got half of the team works on happiness and half the team works on productivity. And I think like a community that's productive, that's how, it's productive. We're creating jobs and we're growing and we're being productive. That's a healthy thing. And then and doing it happy, like we live lives and be happy. So we measure our team's happiness every day, our guests' happiness every day, and our community happiness every day. And this is what Elon Musk would say is like the worst thing you can do is have is have smart people walking around and giving out all the answers because everybody's wrong some of the time. And
Mm-hmm.
so geniuses ask the right questions, right? And this comes back down to leaders and our best teachers and mentors. They're always asking questions, right? You're very good at that. And so I think it's really the genius is in the question. So every day we want to try to continue to improve at the questions we ask our teams, our guests, and our communities on how we can serve them better and ultimately make them and allow for them to be happier and make them happier. And we find that by doing that from now until forever, that's really what shapes our Gibbons way. That's what drives us. And then on the productivity side, the business stuff that I was like kind of almost nervous to talk about because it was like, and I learned this in COVID, right? Profit's a really important thing, but it's almost as like a dirty word to use, almost like, oh, talk about profit. That's all you are
Mm-hmm.
is profit. That's what I receive that a lot from. All you care about is profit. And it's like, well, when you want to raise, that's what we have. We have to take that
Right.
profit to give you the raise. Or
Yeah.
you want to renovate your room. Like that's just the bucket we have to take it to put over there. So it's
Yeah.
not such a bad thing. So on the one side, we've got team happiness, guest happiness, community happiness. And on the other side, we've got revenue happiness. That's what we need to come in. We got profit happiness. That's so us we can manage that revenue in a way that there's some left at the end. And then we've got balance sheet happiness. And so that's my number one
Mm-hmm.
metric is the balance sheet that I'm in charge of continuing to grow so we can pay this our team more and reinvest back in our businesses. Get, every single day someone phones me and asks for money. Every day. We get
Mm-hmm.
someone phoning, whether it's a foundation or a charity, and it feels really good to be able to do that. Like selfishly, it feels good, but it didn't feel good in COVID when there was no money to be able to say,
No.
sorry, I can't. And they were like,
Right.
well, what are we supposed to do? And I'm like, I don't know. We're leveraging houses right now. Like we don't, there's just nothing left. So I think those two, you know, the those are the areas that we're focused on is the human side of it, right? The happiness constantly, while also balancing out the productivity side. And
Mm-hmm.
those seem to be, and the best way for us to achieve that is being above the line. And when you get caught in that drama triangle, there's just no productivity.
Mm-hmm.
You just can't, you're just not progressing. And so you can choose to be there as much as you want. You can go blame people all day long, but you're just not going to be productive from what I've seen.
I love that you've narrowed down the two key metrics of your business that you measure every day down to happiness and productivity, and that you've got your team aligned around checking in on that and then taking action. Joey, I've so enjoyed this conversation. I feel like that's the perfect place to end. Productivity and happiness, doing good things in the world, feeling the contribution that you're making every day as a leader, and knowing that your business is also profitable so that you can give back to your employees, to all your stakeholders, to your community, to the charities that need your support in and around Whistler. And I deeply appreciate you making time to have this chat today.
Well, I appreciate our friendship, Mike, and the support that you've been able to give me. You've always been able to, you have your finger on the pulse when it comes to this leadership development and coaching and that stuff. So it's always helpful for me, and yeah, it's fun to chat about. So thanks for your support on this journey. And I think it's worthwhile. It's a worthwhile journey. There's definitely days where I could question it and say it might be nicer to sit on a beach, but
Right?
most days feel pretty good. Yeah, so it's nice. Thank you.
Thanks, Jerry.